Morning sunlight crept softly across the slats of the blinds, striping the kitchen floor with pale gold. Thomas sat at the table, his coffee cooling beside him, staring at the same spot on the wall he had stared at every morning for weeks. He was listening again, to that familiar sound, a car door slamming, heels clicking, a short, irritated huff from across the hedge. Then, the inevitable thud of a car door closing directly in front of his driveway. He didn't even need to look anymore. He already knew. Karen's SUV. Every single morning, without fail, it appeared across the mouth of his driveway like a gray, gleaming gate. The car was never there overnight. She always came around 8, when she left her own driveway a few houses down, then pulled across to his side of the street. She parked exactly where she knew she shouldn't. Thomas sighed. His house wasn't fancy, just a small, cedar-paneled place at the edge of the subdivision. He loved it for its quiet, the old oak tree shading the porch, and the narrow driveway he'd poured himself years ago. But lately, that quiet had been broken, one small irritation at a time, by the Homeowners Association president, Karen. At first, he'd told himself it didn't matter. He'd politely asked, once, twice, maybe 5 times. She'd always say, "Oh, I'll just be a minute," or, "I'm only stopping by the mail kiosk," or, "You can squeeze by, can't you?" But her minute could stretch to an hour. Sometimes more. Now it was every morning. He rose, finished his coffee, and stepped outside. The air was fresh, tinged with pine and cut grass. Birds fluttered in the trees above. But all he could see was that silver SUV sitting smugly across his driveway, its license plate catching the light like a grin. Thomas rubbed his temples, took a breath, and walked over. "Karen," he called out as she fussed with her purse by the HOA mailbox. "Can you move the car, please? I've got to head out." She turned, squinting against the sun, and gave a practiced smile. "Morning, Tom." "Oh, don't worry, I'll be gone in just a sec. I need to grab the paperwork for the community meeting. You've been saying that for 3 weeks." Her smile stiffened. "You know, if your driveway weren't so narrow, this wouldn't be such a problem." Thomas stared at her, speechless. He turned and walked back toward his porch. Behind him, he heard the car door slam again. She didn't move it. The pressure builds. Over the next few days, the pattern repeated itself. Thomas tried being patient, then polite, then firm. He even left notes under her wipers, short, calm messages asking her not to park there. She ignored every one. One afternoon, after missing a delivery because the truck couldn't reach his house, Thomas finally called the HOA. But of course, Karen was the HOA. She chaired the meetings, managed the parking regulations, and controlled the fines. When he complained, she laughed softly over the phone. "Thomas," she said, "the street isn't your property. Maybe you should relax a bit." That was when he realized she wasn't careless. She was deliberate. He started noticing other things, letters in his mailbox from the HOA about improper hedge height, trash bins left out too long, fence color not in compliance. Each signed at the bottom, Karen Phillips, HOA president. It was almost comical. Almost. At night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to think of what to do. He didn't want to fight. He just wanted peace. But every day, that car in front of his driveway felt like a small victory flag she planted in his life. The turning point. One Saturday morning, after another blocked exit, Thomas sat on his porch with a sketchbook and pen. He wasn't angry anymore. He was thoughtful. He measured his driveway. With quiet precision, then the space before it, the small patch of gravel and grass between the road and his gate. He spent the rest of the weekend at the hardware store, talking to suppliers, doing math on his phone, comparing prices for concrete, stone, and steel rebar. Neighbors noticed the deliveries a week later: piles of gravel, bags of cement, steel mesh. "What are you building, Tom?" asked his next-door neighbor, Mary, as she watched him mark the ground with chalk lines. "Planters," he said, smiling faintly. Big ones. About 4 tons each." Mary blinked. "You serious?" "Oh, very." For 3 days, he worked steadily. Mixing, pouring, shaping. The smell of wet concrete filled the air. By evening, 2 massive rectangular planters stood like sentinels at the edge of his driveway, one on each side. He filled them with soil, planted tall shrubs, and added small solar lights along the edges. They were beautiful, subtle, permanent. Karen didn't notice them until Monday morning. Thomas was on his porch with coffee when she arrived in her usual spot, only to find that there wasn't enough room. The planters narrowed the gap so tightly that her SUV couldn't possibly fit without blocking the road itself. She stopped, rolled down her window, frowned, then pulled forward anyway. The car's sensors beeped angrily as she tried to maneuver. Eventually, she gave up, reversing awkwardly down the street. Thomas hid his smile behind his mug. The aftermath. The next day, he received an official notice from the HOA. Greater than Dear Mr. Whitaker, it has come to our attention that you have constructed large, unapproved concrete structures near the roadway. These may violate community aesthetic guidelines. Please remove them within 7 days or face a fine. Sincerely, Karen Phillips, HOA President. He laughed out loud. That afternoon, he drafted a letter of his own, attaching photos, receipts, and a copy of the HOA's own landscaping rules. Rules that explicitly allowed decorative planters, for safety and beautification, provided they didn't extend beyond the property line. His didn't. He mailed it the same day. A week passed. No reply. But the SUV never returned. Karen still drove by occasionally, glaring from behind her sunglasses, but she never parked there again. The planters stood firm, gray, silent guardians of his peace. A gentle shift. Summer arrived. The shrubs in the planters grew lush and green. Birds nested among them. The small solar lights flickered softly at night, marking the edge of his driveway with a warm, golden glow. Thomas began spending more time outside, watering, pruning, talking to passing neighbors. Many stopped to compliment his landscaping. Some even said they were thinking of building planters of their own. The neighborhood slowly changed tone. One evening, Mary stopped by with lemonade. You know, she said, I think Karen's learned her lesson. She hasn't blocked anyone lately. Thomas smiled. Maybe she realized concrete's a better negotiator than words. They both laughed. He didn't hate Karen anymore. In a strange way, he was even grateful. Her stubbornness had forced him to act, not with anger, but with resolve. To protect his space with strength that was quiet and enduring. The confrontation. It wasn't until late autumn that Karen finally spoke to him again. She caught him outside one morning, standing by the mailbox. Her SUV was parked legally down the street. Thomas, she began, crossing her arms. Those planters are excessive. He turned slowly, keeping his tone calm. They're decorative. HOA approved. Her mouth tightened. You really went to all that trouble just to block me. He smiled slightly. No, I went to that trouble to make sure no one blocks me. There's a difference. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she shook her head and walked away, muttering something under her breath. Thomas watched her go, then turned back toward his house. The morning sun glowed on the planters, lighting their smooth surfaces like stone monuments. He felt a deep, steady peace. Resolution. Months later, as winter approached, frost edged the shrubs in the planters. The lights still came on every night, a soft beacon marking the space that once caused him so much frustration. The neighborhood grew quieter. Karen, though still HOA president, had mellowed. She even sent out a newsletter congratulating homeowners on creative landscaping improvements. Thomas smiled when he read it. He stood one evening by the planters, brushing a few leaves from their rims. The air smelled of pine and cold earth. Somewhere, a dog barked in the distance. The world felt simple again. He realized that sometimes strength didn't mean confrontation or loud defiance. Sometimes it meant building something solid, something that said, without words, this is my space. Respect it. As the last of the light faded, Thomas turned toward his house. The planters stood behind him, heavy and unmoving, the quiet guardians of a man who had finally reclaimed his peace.